time for the wedding. Harry says that he stood at the altar in his household cavalry frock coat. So, lest you forget, William didn't get to wear his, but Harry got to wear his. And he says that he was watching Meg come down the aisle, and the soloist was singing Eternal Source of Light Divine. Yeah, well, Handel's talking about God there, okay? But anyway, he keeps thinking, oh, you know, that he had chosen that song for her to walk down. It's like so sacrilegious in a way. Oh gosh, what does Harry not know? And as she's walking down, he says, "Amazing, I could even hear the music over the sound of my own heartbeat." As Meg stepped up and took my hand, the present dissolved and the past came rushing back. Our first tentative messages on Instagram, our first meeting at Soho House, our first trip to Botswana, our first excited exchanges after my phone went into the river, our first roast chicken, our first flights back and forth across the Atlantic, the first time I told her I love you, hearing her say it back, Guy in splints, Steve the grumpy swan, the brutal fight to keep us safe from the press. And now here we were, the finishing line, the starting line also. These are the things that's going through his mind. This is the depth of their relationship. Y'all, what? As he's cataloging everything that has been so profound, he's got to throw in that Guy was in splints and Steve the grumpy swan. Like, he has so few things to hang on to that he's experienced with her that Steve the grumpy swan makes the list as she's walking down the aisle to Eternal Source of Light Divine. Okay. I mean, what are these non-moments? And then I saw a peanut butter sandwich next to the subway stairs. Remember that time? I mean, it's just like, what is this? Okay, anyway. Here they were finally getting married. And it was a beautiful moment because, you know, quite frankly, not much of the wedding plan had really gone to plan. And he'd reminded himself that none of those things had been the plan. You know, he could have been upset about it before, but none of that was the plan. This was the plan. He and Meg getting married. This love, you know, finally having a chance to do it. And he looked at Paul walking Meg down the aisle. And the thing is that it wasn't her dad, but it was special just the same. And she had been moved when Paul had offered to walk her down the aisle. Still, it didn't make up for her dad's behavior, you know, or how the press had used him. But still, at least Paul had stepped in. Okay, you guys. You know, I don't do a whole lot of external work when it comes to this book, because the whole point of this series is let's catch him in all the lies he's telling us without any external sources. But I did just want to say, I saw Piers Morgan interview over the weekend, and he was talking about Meg and how he had always thought that she was a vapid Hollywood starlet. I mean, he'd known that early. But then he was talking about the fact that her behavior before the wedding was so shady. And when none of her family came and all the business with her dad, and she made no effort to figure out a way for her dad to come. And then it all came out that, oh, actually, it wasn't the dad of his own, he wasn't so beleaguered and confused and put upon by the media. She had entrapped him, because the truth is she didn't want him to come. He is an odd man. You know, I mean, putting plywood over your windows far before any of this had happened. You know, he's just kind of not very put together, and, you know, he wouldn't make a good appearance. She didn't want him. And so she acted like, oh, he has wounded me. He didn't come. He abandoned me. He canceled last minute. No, you orchestrated it so he wouldn't come because you were embarrassed of him. And then you could act like the poor put upon victim. My daddy didn't even come to my own wedding. My Daddy, where are you? It's the demon press again, stepping in, ruining my life. My daddy would have come, but then the paparazzi, they tricked him. No, you organized that. And there's receipts. So he says that his Aunt Jane stood and did a reading in honor of Mummy. They read from Song of Solomon. He says he and Meg chose it. I bet they did. And the passage is, "Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave." And he loved that line, strong as death and fierce as the grave. Yes, I thought, yes. But what I think to myself is, isn't it interesting that all his positives are negatives? That death and graves and imagery to that extent, it's like the only thing his mind can understand. It's always got to be these extremes with him. Then he talks about the ring that he had given to Meg. It was made out of Welsh gold. There's a hunk of Welsh gold that he'd been worried there wouldn't be enough for his bride to have, and Kate's ring had been made out of the same hunk of Welsh gold. They'd managed to scrap some together for Meghan. And he says of the ring, "Granny told me that this was nearly the last of it. Last of the gold. That's how I felt about Meg." What? What does that mean? Okay, then he goes on with this lie, which has already been debunked, so I don't even know why he's still pressing the issue. He says that the Archbishop reached the official part, and he spoke the few words that made them the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which were titles that had been bestowed by Granny. And the Archbishop joined them until death. Did they part? And Harry says he'd already done this similarly days earlier in their garden, in a small ceremony, just the two of them. Guy and Pula, the only witnesses. He admits it was unofficial and non-binding, except in their souls. They were grateful for every person in and around St. George's and watching on TV. But their love began in private, and being public had been mostly pain, so they wanted the first consecration of their love, their first vows, to be private as well. Magical as the formal ceremony was, we'd both come to feel slightly frightened of crowds. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so he says that, underscoring that feeling, the first thing they saw when they were walking back up the aisle and out of the church, other than the stream of smiling faces, were snipers. Apparently on the rooftops, amid the bunting, behind the waterfalls of streamers, police told me that it was unusual but necessary for them to have placed those snipers everywhere that he claims he saw. Isn't a sniper supposed to be unobtrusive? Aren't you supposed to not see them? Anyway, apparently his keen eyesight picked up on him. And he said that the necessity for the snipers was because of the unprecedented number of threats that the police had been picking up on. Okay. I'm not even going to dignify that foolishness with a response.